Hey everybody, it's Carson Gordy, the Champagne sports anchor for Fox, Illinois, and we got a full preview of this Illinois NCAA tournament. This was a team around 3 weeks ago. People had questions whether they were going to make the NCAA tournament. They were 17-11, three-game losing streak. Everybody remembers that 43-point loss to Duke. And Brad Underwood talked about it. That is the kind of game that can break a season. But Illinois responded. 3 straight wins over Iowa by 20 points, Michigan by 20 points, beat Purdue. And Illinois got a 6 seed in this NCAA tournament. That's a pretty good seed historically for Illinois. They're going to be in the Midwest region. In that first game, they have to take on a play-in team. It's either going to be Xavier or Texas. They're going to be playing on Wednesday night. In the round of 32, they would likely play the Kentucky Wildcats. But Illinois's got to remember, this is a tournament where it is win or go home. Illinois all year has dealt with inconsistencies. There's been times where a lot of people thought that Illinois was a Final Four contender. You know, at one time they were 12-3 with blowout wins over Indiana, Penn State, Oregon, beat Missouri. This was a team that was beloved by advanced analytics. You had Kaspers Jakubonis scoring 20 points per game and looking like a top 5 pick. You had Thomas Ivicic picking and popping 3-point shots. But we've seen since January 4th, this team has been undone by injuries and illness and inconsistent play. 2 things can be true. Does it suck that Thomas Ivicic had mono and missed a couple games? Yes. But he's not the reason why they had 17 turnovers against Rutgers, USC, and Nebraska. We've seen with this Illinois team, sometimes the youth and inexperience has maybe got to them. I think a prime example is that Big Ten tournament. You know, Friday, they score 106 points against Iowa. They look super energetic. Then the next day against Maryland, they lose by 25 points. Brad Underwood talked about it.
Yeah, we were bouncing off the walls before the Iowa game. We weren't that energetic. That's my fault. We weren't maybe as focused leading up to that game as we needed to be.
For this Texas Xavier matchup, both of these teams have flaws. This is a game where Illinois is going to be predicted to win. Xavier's led by Sean Miller. That's the longtime head coach. He made like 5 Elite Eights at Arizona. He develops a ton of talent. He took over an Xavier program that missed the NCAA tournament 5 straight years. And now in 3 years, they've already made it twice. They're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. They make the 7th most in college basketball. A couple guys I would look out for is Zach Freemantle. He's a 6'9" forward who scores 17 points per game. And they got a really good guard with Ryan Canwell, who scores 17 points as well. They're currently a 3.5-point favorite over the Texas Longhorns. And then Texas, this one is a very interesting team. This was a team that just moved to the SEC this year, and they have a ton of talent. I mean, you look at the roster, they have 6 guys or 5 guys that are scoring in double figures. You got a good guard with Pope, who's scoring 11 points per game. You got a top guy like Trey Johnson, who's scoring 20 points per game. I mean, this is a guy that can heat up and win a shootout against Illinois if they get there. But Texas, they're also dealing with some turmoil. You know, we're seeing a lot of reports that Rodney Terry, their head coach, he's on the hot seat. Because in Texas, making the NCAA tournament isn't enough. Just ask Rick Barnes, who's there from 2000 to 2015. That was the guy that developed Kevin Durant and made a Final Four, and they still fired him because he wasn't winning enough in the NCAA tournament. So this Texas team has been super underachieving this year at just 19-15. They got a couple good wins over their rival, Texas A&M. They also beat Missouri like Illinois. But this is a team that doesn't play any defense. And you can say that about Xavier too. If Illinois plays these teams, I would expect shootouts. And this Illinois team coming into the year, you know, last year they made the Elite Eight and they lost pretty much everybody on the roster. But Brad Underwood wanted the challenge. He wanted to win a national championship. You saw when they lost to UConn last year, they probably didn't have enough NBA talent. Terrence Shannon was great, but Quincy Guerrier is not a first-round pick. Justin Harmon, Luke Goody. So what Brad Underwood did was restructure this roster where he would have athletic guys that can shoot the 3-point shot and sprinkle in with some NBA talent. Kaspers Jakubonis, despite inconsistent play over the last month or so, he's still projected to be a top 10 pick. When he's locked in, he's one of the best passers in college basketball. I think Will Riley is the guy that has really, really shined. You know, in December and January, this was a guy that was shooting 30% and scoring 6 points and couldn't play defense and wasn't passing the ball. And now he's bulked. He's added 20 points 20 pounds throughout the year. So he's up to 195. And he's their top scorer. Over the last 13 games, scoring 16 points per game. The shot selection's better. You're seeing the confidence to attack the rim and not be scared to get fouled. His assist numbers have skyrocketed. He's getting 4 a game. Those are the 2 guys that you need to be locked in if you want to go on a deep run. You need your projected NBA first-round draft picks to play well. And if Illinois is fortunate enough to win that game against Xavier/Texas, they would most likely take on the number 3 seed, the Kentucky Wildcats, Milwaukee. Kentucky no longer coached by John Calipari. They brought in Mark Pope, who was a member of that 1997 national championship team. He's 6'10", and he's a great offensive coach. When he was at BYU last year, that was a top 10 offense that was knocking down a bunch of three-point shots. It's a lot of the same story with the Wildcats. If you want to look at their full resume, they're 22-11, and they're a top 10 team when it comes to making three-point shots. Otega Owa is a guy that's really good. He's scoring 16 points per game. Kobe Bray, the Dayton transfers, adding another 11. They got a little bit of size with Amari Williams, who's getting around 11 points per game at that 6'10" frame. So this isn't a team that has a bunch of 17, 18-point scorers. This is one of the oldest teams in college basketball. I mean, you look down their college basketball reference of the roster, senior, junior. That usually really works well for the NCAA tournament. Kentucky over the last 5 years of John Calipari, they were getting early season exits. And you could argue maybe that youth and inexperience was hurting them in these NCAA tournament games. Mark Pope has changed a little bit of things, and this is a team that I could see making the Elite Eight. Does Illinois match up against them? Well, they've had a couple common opponents. Arkansas beat Kentucky, but Illinois beat Arkansas. They've both played Missouri. This is the kind of game, if they play each other, defense optional. Illinois' defense since January has been really poor. And some of that's been due to injuries when Ivisic and Merez Johnson was out. So it was easy for these teams to go inside and get layups and dunks. You're not that confident when Kerry Booth or Ben Hummerkaus or Jake Davis, has to guard 6'11", 7-foot Big Ten centers. Illinois also had turnover issues, which can sometimes lead to easy scoring opportunities in transition for the opposing team. Definitely, you're going to see a shootout, 95-90, if these two teams get to play each other. And now going to the rest of the bracket, how do I feel about Illinois? I think this is a team that can make the Sweet 16. They had really good wins over Arkansas, Oregon, Missouri, Wisconsin. They got 8 quad 1 wins. That's top 5 in college basketball. My issue is that you can't predict if a team shoots well or not. How am I supposed to know if Illinois goes 2 of 26 against Duke, like what they did against Duke, or if they go 15 of 30 like they did against Oregon? How do I know if Kasper Jokic is going to have 6 turnovers and 0 assists, like what he did against Iowa in the Big Ten tournament? KJ and Will Riley, just sometimes you're not getting 20 points a game guaranteed. We knew we were going to get that with Terrence Shannon last year, who was a 5th-year senior. You knew that Marcus Demas was going to add 15, who was a 5th-year senior. You knew Coleman Hawkins was going to play pretty good defense and have the ability to really shine as the number 3 guy on that Illinois roster last year. I just think with this team, individually, they can win any game. Straight up, Kentucky's playing Illinois in the State Farm Center or neutral site in February. Hell, sure, Illinois can outscore them. But the issue is we just haven't seen Illinois string it along consistency. Just throughout the year, they beat Oregon and Penn State, then they lose to USC and Nebraska. They go on that really good 4-game winning streak where they smack Michigan on the road by 20 points. They finally beat Purdue. And then they lose by Maryland. They were down 40 points at one time. So with this Illinois team, sure, they could go on a deep run like what North Carolina State did last year. Or some other lower seeds like UConn in 2014, if other teams get upset ahead of them. But I can't predict that. I just have a hard time believing at this moment that Illinois could beat a 3 seed, a 2 seed, and a 1 seed in consecutive games and make a Final Four. So right now, I do have Illinois losing to Kentucky in the round of 32 game, but I'll be the first one to admit I won't be shocked if they do win that one. But just for fun, let's just say Illinois does get by the Kentucky Wildcats in the round of 32. They would likely get a rematch with the Tennessee Volunteers in Indianapolis for the Sweet 16. This was a team where they played in December, Tennessee and Illinois, and they're polar opposites. Illinois, really good offense, kind of a poor defense as of late. They're a lot younger than Tennessee, and Tennessee's vice versa. You know, they have a top 5 defense in college basketball, and they raked up a lot of good wins in SEC play. If Illinois played them in a rematch, you better knock down your 3-point shots, because Tennessee's post play, they're not going to just let you get easy layups and dunks. They're going to try to force a bunch of turnovers on Kylan Boswell and also Kaspers Yakichonis. Now let's have extra fun. Let's say they beat Tennessee. They would probably play the number 1 seed, the Houston Cougars, in the Elite 8 in Indianapolis. Houston's been arguably the best college basketball program over the last 5 seasons in the regular season. They came into the Big 12 and they took that conference right away from Kansas. Back-to-back outright championships. Calvin Sampson. A lot of Illinois people don't like him because he stole Eric Gordon in 2007 from Bruce Weber, and that was the downfall of Bruce Weber. But the guy can flat out coach. This was a guy that made a Final Four at Oklahoma. This was a guy that took over Indiana and was 22-4 before getting fired for NCAA violations. This is a guy that has turned one of the worst programs in the country in Houston to a team that's a Final Four contender on an annual basis. Now, Sampson, the last 6 years have been great, but they only made one Final Four, and that's despite getting 1s and 2 seeds. I would just say sometimes they don't have the offense to kind of keep up in the NCAA tournament. The big one was in 2022. Remember, they beat that Illinois Kofi Coburn team. They beat Arizona in the Sweet 16, and then they only scored 40 points in the Elite 8. So that left a sour taste in their mouth. And last year, they were probably going to make the national championship or the Final Four, but their best player, Cryer, got injured and was out for that Duke game. But this Houston team, this is the best offense that Sampson's had in probably a decade. Top 5 offense, top 5 defense. This is the absolute ceiling for Illinois. I do not see them beating Houston really under any circumstance, but getting back-to-back Elite Eights would be huge for the program. Remember, this is an Illinois team or program that hasn't really had as much March Madness success as you would think. You know, historically, it's a really good regular season program. Lou Henson, top 5 Big Ten almost every single year, but he only had 4 Sweet 16s. Lon Kruger would win 20 games a year, 0 Sweet 16s. Bruce Weber, end of his tenure, fell off. Brad Underwood, for how great he's been, he's only had 1 Sweet 16 so far, and that was last season. I don't even want to bring up Sister Jean and Loyola because that was so tough in 2021. That was a 1 seed with Io. Should have made the Final Four, but crap happens. So I just think Illinois, you got to look at things in perspective. This was a team that lost a lot of old guys last year. Shannon, Marcus, Coleman, Quincy, Luke Goody. And Brad's done a pretty darn good job this year. I mean, this is a team where they're not dysfunctional. I just think physically they're inconsistent. And that happens with young guys. You can't expect an 18-year-old to score 25 points every game for Kaspers. You know, Will Riley, we saw it in December and January. He was really struggling. That's what freshmen do. So for Illinois to go through just this up and down from preseason unranked to all the way to top 10 in the country with great wins, and then they fell right back down at 17-11, and people thought they would miss the NCAA tournament. And now they got a 6 seed. And they got a reasonable path to make the Sweet 16. Appreciate this. This is awesome. The fact that all they have to do is beat Xavier/Texas, which Illinois is going to be favored in. And then they just have to play and shoot well against Kentucky, who doesn't play defense, and boom, they make back-to-back Sweet 16s for the first time since 2005. That's awesome. I like that. And then next year, let's bring back some old guys. Bring back Kylan Boswell, who's scoring 16 points per game over his last 5. Bring back Marez Johnson, the really good 6'10 center who's scoring around 10 points per game and 8 rebounds over, the last month. Bring back Tom Savicic, the 22-year-old European pro who can pick and pop a 3-point shot. Bring back Trey White, who can score 16 points per game and play good defense. The 2 guys I think you're going to be replacing, because it's just so hard to say no to NBA first-round money, is Will Riley and Kaspers Yakichonis. But Brad recruits. Brad got Io. Brad got Kofi. Brad got Terrence Shannon. Brad got Jaden Epps. Brad got Sky Clark. Matt Meyer. He gets talent. Did you even know who Will Riley was last March when he was a high schooler in Canada, a junior in high school? who reclassified. Did you even know Kasper Siakachonis? Do you follow Lithuanian basketball that closely? If you can keep enough old guys like Boswell, Hummerkaus, Ivisic, Mrez Johnson, and have one of the best front courts in America, and you trust Brad to pick off a couple more 4 and 5 stars, or maybe a good transfer, Illinois is going to be a really dangerous top 15, top 10 team next year. And we've seen with Brad Underwood, he does best with 2 to 3 year projects. I know Illinois lost in the round of 32 to Loyola, but that was a 1 seed. That was the 3rd favorite to win the national title. That's a really good year. But the point was that took years to build. That was year 4 for Brad. That was Io's junior year. That was Kofi's sophomore year. Trent and DeMonte were playing, their senior seasons. They gelled and they were together and they were old. Look at last year's roster. It was great making the Elite Eight with, Marcus and Domask. But that's because that team was great because he retained a lot from the previous season, which was dysfunctional. Remember that 2022-2023 team was a 9 seed that lost in the first round to Arkansas. And there was a lot of dysfunction with Jaden Epps, Sky Clark, Matt Meyer. But what Brad did was he kept the best guys from that roster for the next year, added Marcus, and they made the Elite Eight. So I think we're seeing a similar formula next year. You can keep the older guys and add some more talent to supplement and not fully rely on it. This Illinois team is going to be really good. And I think Brad Underwood understood that during that Wisconsin loss this year. Wisconsin's got John Tanji and they got Blackwell and they got Stephen Krull, who's just a phenomenal, seems like an 8th year center. And Brad Underwood's like, yeah, it's pretty nice. I know what that's like having old guys. He was talking about that Shannon team. So bottom line, the future is bright for Illinois basketball. I do think they're going to lose this round of 32 game to Kentucky, but if Illinois makes 15 threes, yes, they're going to win. If they make 12 threes, they're going to win. I was looking at a crazy stat earlier. This is such a low bar for this Illinois offense. If they just make 8 3-pointers since January 1st, they're 10-2. 8's a really low number. And this is an Illinois offense that's been heavily structured around the 3-point shot. Brad wants 30, 40, 50 3-pointers a game. He's following that NBA analytics model. So Illinois, they got the path. Everybody knows what they need to do. It's just, we've watched them all year. Can they be consistent? Because they score 106 points against Iowa, then they lose to then they lose to Maryland the next game by 40. They beat Oregon by 32, and then they lose to USC. So I think it's been a really interesting basketball year. I'm excited to see that Xavier-Texas matchup. Illinois will be favored in both. Taking on blue blood like Kentucky and Milwaukee is going to be great. I expect a lot of orange and blue. And hell, you win that game, you make back-to-back Sweet 16s for the first time since 2005. Sounds like a good year to me. All right, thanks everybody for watching. I'm Carson Gordy. Enjoy the NCAA tournament. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to watch more videos from News Channel 20.